The air over Chester County, Pennsylvania, smelled of iron and gunpowder long before Anthony Wayne ever held a sword. He was born in 1745, into a world balanced between wilderness and war, a land where every sunrise brought both opportunity and danger. His father, Isaac Wayne, was a soldier-turned-farmer, a man of iron discipline, who believed that a man's worth was measured not by wealth, but by courage. Their home, a small stone house near Waynesboro, echoed with tales of bravery from the frontier wars. From childhood, young Anthony listened, wide-eyed, as his father spoke of men who refused to yield, even when the odds were impossible. By the time he turned 16, Anthony was already restless. He studied mathematics, engineering, and strategy at a small academy in Philadelphia, but the fire in his blood was not for numbers, it was for command. His teachers said he had too much of Mars in his nature. The Roman god of war himself seemed to whisper in his ear. When the revolution broke out, Wayne didn't hesitate. The colonies were rebelling against the mightiest empire on earth, and Anthony Wayne, tall, fierce-eyed, and proud, stepped forward. He was only 30 when he was commissioned a colonel in the Continental Army. His men soon discovered what kind of leader he was. Wayne didn't bark orders from safety, he led from the front, sword in hand, his boots deep in the same mud as theirs. He believed a commander should share the same risks as his soldiers, the same hunger, the same fear, the same cold. He drilled his men with brutal precision. Discipline, he'd say, is the soul of an army. And when he wasn't shouting commands, he was teaching how to fight in darkness, how to move through forests without sound, how to strike like lightning and vanish like smoke. But beneath that iron will, there was also something else, a fury. He demanded perfection, not out of pride, but out of belief. He believed that courage was contagious, that one man's fire could ignite hundreds. His first real test came in Canada, during the ill-fated invasion of Quebec. It was chaos. Supplies were short, weather brutal, men sick and starving. But Wayne never broke. When bullets tore through snow and fog, he charged forward, shouting to his men, "Push on, brave lads! Liberty is not for cowards." They failed to take the city, but Wayne's leadership had been noticed. He was soon promoted to brigadier general. By 1777, his name was whispered across camps, not just as a soldier, but as something else, a force of nature. He was there at Brandywine, where Washington's army was forced to retreat. Wayne fought like a man possessed, rallying troops again and again under heavy fire. He was nearly captured, but cut his way out through British lines, his uniform slashed, his face streaked with smoke. Later, at Paoli, his camp was attacked at night by British forces. It was a massacre, hundreds of his men cut down in the dark by bayonet and saber. Wayne barely escaped, furious at the slaughter. The newspapers mocked it as the Paoli massacre, and some accused him of failure. But Wayne didn't defend himself with words, he swore vengeance instead. And from that night on, something inside him changed. The calm, young officer was gone. In his place rose a warrior burning with controlled fury, a man who swore that the British would remember his name. His soldiers began calling him Mad Anthony. At first, it was a joke, whispered in camps after long marches. But soon, it became something more. The name stuck because it fit. He fought like a storm, unpredictable, fearless, relentless. He demanded the impossible, and his men delivered it, not out of fear, but because they believed he would never ask what he wouldn't do himself. By 1779, the revolution was at its darkest hour. Supplies dwindled, morale was low, and Washington needed miracles, not just victories. And so, when he needed a man to lead the most dangerous assault of the war, a night attack on the British fortress at Stony Point, he called only one name: General Mad Anthony Wayne. The night of July 15, 1779, was hot and heavy with mist. The Hudson River lay still under a moon that refused to shine. On its banks, General Anthony Wayne gathered 1,200 of his toughest men, silent, hardened, and ready to strike. Before them stood Stony Point, a British stronghold thought to be untouchable. Fortified by cannon, surrounded by marshes, cliffs, and water, it was guarded by veterans who laughed at the thought that anyone could take it. But Wayne wasn't anyone. He walked among his men before the attack, his uniform damp with sweat, his sword glinting faintly under the lantern light. "No musket shall be fired," he ordered. "You will rely only on your bayonets. The watchword is, 'The fort's ours.'" Each man tied a white piece of paper to his hat so they could recognize one another in the dark. Then they moved, quiet as shadows, hearts pounding like drums. The British never saw them coming. Wayne led the assault personally, at the very front. A musket ball tore across his temple, blood streamed down his face, but he didn't stop. He pressed a hand to the wound and shouted, "Carry me forward! Let me die in the fort!" That single cry electrified his men. They surged up the hill, bayonets flashing in the dark, crashing into the enemy lines like thunder. Within 25 minutes, the impossible had happened. Stony Point had fallen. It was one of the most daring and flawless attacks of the entire war. When Washington heard the news, he said only one thing: "The conduct of General Wayne and his men reflects the highest honor upon American arms." Wayne, ever the soldier, refused to gloat. He simply wrote in his report, "The fort and garrison, with their stores, are ours." The men behaved like men who are determined to be free. From that day, Mad Anthony Wayne became a legend. His reputation spread across the colonies and across the ocean. To the British, his name meant terror. To the Americans, it meant victory. But the war was far from over. In 1781, the fighting shifted south, to Virginia and the Carolinas, where Lord Cornwallis was pushing toward the heart of the rebellion. Wayne was sent to help General Lafayette hold the line. The conditions were brutal. His men were starving, exhausted, and outnumbered. Yet Wayne kept them steady, his will like iron. When Cornwallis advanced with a superior force, Wayne did something that would become the stuff of legend. Facing overwhelming odds, he didn't retreat. He charged. With only 800 men against nearly 5,000 British, Wayne ordered a direct bayonet assault, a maneuver so reckless that even his officers hesitated. But Wayne rode ahead, shouting, "Charge the enemy, and remember, you are Americans." The audacity stunned Cornwallis. The British line hesitated, just long enough for Wayne's men to strike, bayonets gleaming in the sun, drums pounding across the Virginia fields. The attack broke the British momentum. Wayne pulled back before being surrounded, but the message was clear: America would never kneel. When victory finally came at Yorktown later that year, Wayne was there, standing beside Washington as Cornwallis's army surrendered. He had fought in nearly every major campaign, survived wounds, betrayals, and the endless hardship of war. But peace, for Wayne, was never easy. After the Revolution, he tried his hand at politics, serving in Congress, but the halls of government bored him. The frontier still called his name, and his destiny wasn't finished. In 1792, when President George Washington needed someone to lead a new army against the powerful Native American Confederation in the Ohio Valley, there was only one man he trusted. Not because of loyalty alone, but because Wayne was the only one who could rebuild the Army's spirit. The last American expedition into the Northwest had ended in disaster, hundreds killed in the forests of Ohio. The frontier tribes, armed and guided by British influence from Canada, ruled the wilderness. Settlers lived in constant fear. Wayne accepted the mission. He built a new army from the ashes, men broken, undisciplined, half-trained. But under him, they became something different. He drilled them relentlessly, forged them into what he called the Legion of the United States. When critics called him too harsh, Wayne replied, "You can't make soldiers by writing orders. You make them by sweat, steel, and discipline." His new army was feared and respected. By 1794, they were ready to march. And once again, as always, Wayne would lead from the front. The year was 1794. The Revolution was over, but the land was not at peace. In the forests north of the Ohio River, the Native American Confederation, led by legendary warriors like Blue Jacket of the Shawnee and Little Turtle of the Miami, had united to resist American expansion. Backed by British outposts in Canada, they fought fiercely to protect their homeland. The United States had already lost 2 full armies to them. The frontier was bleeding, settlers fleeing, forts abandoned, morale shattered. President George Washington knew there was only one man who could restore order. He turned to his old comrade, the man who never yielded, who forged victory from chaos. General Mad Anthony Wayne. Wayne accepted the call with the same calm fire that had carried him through the Revolution. He began his campaign not with glory, but with rebuilding. He found an army in ruins, demoralized, starving, drunk, and mutinous. But where others saw despair, Wayne saw raw clay. He would hammer it into steel. At Legionville, near Pittsburgh, he built America's first true military training camp. There, under his relentless command, farmers became fighters again. He drilled them in formations, marksmanship, and close combat. He taught them to move silently through forests, to strike with precision, to become a disciplined machine rather than a mob of militiamen. Wayne tolerated no weakness. He said, "A soldier without discipline is a danger to himself and his country." His men came to both fear and admire him. They knew he would punish cowardice as swiftly as he rewarded courage. And slowly, the Legion of the United States began to believe in itself. By the summer of 1794, the Legion was ready. Wayne led them west, carving roads through forests and swamps, fortifying every step with precision. He built Fort Recovery on the exact site where a previous American army had been massacred. It was a message to the enemy: we do not retreat. As Wayne advanced deeper into Ohio, the Native Confederation, guided by British agents, gathered for a decisive battle near a strange landscape littered with fallen trees, the aftermath of a massive storm. It would be known as Fallen Timbers. The morning of August 20th, 1794, was humid and still. Mist coiled around the broken trunks, and somewhere beyond, thousands of native warriors waited in ambush. Wayne rode at the front, now nearly 50 years old, but still radiating the same iron energy he'd had at Stony Point. He raised his sword and called out, "Remember your training. Fight as one, strike as thunder." The first volleys cracked through the trees. The Legion staggered but did not falter. Wayne ordered a full charge, bayonets flashing, cavalry flanking hard to the right. The native warriors fought fiercely, their war cries echoing through the forest, but Wayne's line held, precise, relentless, unstoppable. When his officers hesitated to pursue the retreating enemy, fearing an ambush near a British-held fort, Wayne answered coldly, "I'll charge the British fort itself if they interfere." He pressed forward, driving the Confederation into full retreat. In less than 2 hours, the Battle of Fallen Timbers was over. It was the final great battle for control of the Northwest Territory, and it shattered the Native alliance. The British, watching from their nearby post at Fort Miami, refused to open their gates to their former allies. The Confederation's power collapsed. Wayne had achieved what no general before him could. After the battle, Wayne didn't celebrate. He moved carefully, negotiating peace, building forts, and ensuring stability. The following year, in 1795, he signed the Treaty of Greenville, forcing the Native Confederation to cede vast lands of present-day Ohio and Indiana to the United States. The frontier was secured. A new nation had been carved, not from politics, but from blood, steel, and will. President Washington called Wayne's campaign a masterpiece of discipline and command. It was, in truth, the victory that cemented American control of the West and opened the path for expansion. But the triumph came at a cost. Years of battle had worn Wayne's body down. The endless marches, wounds, and fever had begun to consume him. In December 1796, returning from the frontier, he fell ill near Presque Isle, Pennsylvania. Even as his strength faded, he refused to rest, still overseeing reports and writing orders. On December 15th, he quietly passed away, a soldier to the end. His men buried him at the edge of Lake Erie, near the fort he had built with his own hands. They said that, at night, the wind off the lake sometimes carried the faint echo of drums, as if Mad Anthony still rode the frontier, watching over the land he fought to secure. He was the embodiment of the soldier's creed: courage without fear, discipline without mercy, and honor without end. Where others saw madness, Wayne saw destiny. Where others broke, he charged. And in the birth of a nation, few men burned brighter or left a legacy so fierce. The year was 1796, and the frontier had quieted, but not silenced. The guns that once roared through Ohio now lay cold, buried under years of blood and mud. And somewhere between the forests and the Great Lake shore, General Anthony Wayne, the man they called Mad Anthony, felt the fire within him flickering for the last time. The final march. He had spent more than 2 decades in service, to war, to discipline, to the fragile dream called America. And now, that same duty pulled him across the rugged path home. But fate had other plans. On the road to Pennsylvania, his health began to fail. The years of battle wounds, the bullet scar that crossed his temple from Stony Point, the fever that lingered from the Southern campaigns, all came back like ghosts from his past. At Presque Isle, near the shores of Lake Erie, Wayne stopped to rest in the cold stone barracks of Fort Presque Isle, one of the many forts he himself had built. He was alone. No parade, no glory, no fanfare. Just a soldier and the sound of waves against the shore. To his aide, he said quietly, "Let the army not mourn me as a general, but remember me as a soldier who loved his duty." On the morning of December 15th, 1796, as the winter wind howled across the lake, Anthony Wayne closed his eyes for the last time. He was 51 years old. They buried him there at the fort, wrapped in his uniform, sword by his side, boots still muddied from the march. His grave overlooked the lake, the endless horizon that had always called to him. The legend that wouldn't die. But Mad Anthony didn't rest easily. Years later, his son decided to move his father's remains to the family estate at Waynesboro in eastern Pennsylvania. When they opened the coffin, they found his body still remarkably preserved by the cold lake air. They boiled his bones to carry them home, a grim but determined act of respect. And as the legend goes, while his remains were being transported by wagon across Pennsylvania, villagers along the road swore they saw a rider on a dark horse following the procession, dressed in a continental uniform, sword drawn, eyes burning like fire. Some say it was just a story. Others believed that Mad Anthony Wayne refused to be left behind. Even today, along that same route, locals claim that on cold December nights, the ghost of a soldier still rides the frontier, silent, watchful, unyielding. The general's legacy. But beyond the ghost stories, the real legacy of Anthony Wayne lies in the land itself. Every road westward, every fort that once bore his name, every soldier trained in the spirit of discipline and courage, all carry echoes of him. He had turned defeat into discipline. He had transformed broken militias into legions. And above all, he had proved that the strength of a nation was born not in comfort, but in the furnace of hardship. Wayne's victories at Stony Point and Fallen Timbers were more than battles. They were declarations of what America could be: fearless, determined, unstoppable. For George Washington, he had been more than a general. He was proof that leadership was not about rank or glory. It was about standing in the mud with your men, sword drawn, no matter the odds. Wayne's military tactics became the foundation of the early U.S. Army. His Legion of the United States, disciplined, unified, professional, would evolve into the permanent standing army of the nation. His methods of training, order, and field command would echo through generations, from frontier forts to modern battlefields. The man behind the madness. The title, Mad Anthony, had followed him through every campaign. To some, it meant reckless courage, to others, unstoppable fury. But those who truly knew him said that behind the madness was purpose. He wasn't mad with rage, he was mad with conviction. Every charge, every wound, every sleepless night came from the same belief, that freedom required men willing to bleed for it. He once wrote in a letter, "Let others seek peace in idleness, I find mine only in service." And that is how America remembers him, a man who found peace only in struggle, who lived and died not for himself, but for the idea of a nation still being born. The eternal flame. Today, his name is carved into towns, counties, and schools across the United States, from Wayne, Pennsylvania, to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Each one a silent tribute to the man whose courage helped shape the country's frontier. Every soldier who stands in discipline, every commander who leads from the front, carries a piece of his legacy. And perhaps that's why the stories still linger, not just of his ghostly ride across Pennsylvania, but of the fire that drove him to victory when others would have fallen. Mad Anthony Wayne was not just a warrior. He was the embodiment of what it meant to never surrender, to lead with fury, to serve with faith, and to die with honor. He lived as a soldier, died as a soldier, and became a legend.